Welcome, friends, to episode 289 of the Juicebox Podcast. On today's show, Fiona Wylde will tell us all about her professional paddleboarding and surfing life and her really weird graduation day diagnosis. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Companion Medical, makers of the InPen. To learn more about the InPen, go to companionmedical.com. When you get to companionmedical.com, you're going to learn all about the InPen. It's America's only FDA-cleared smart insulin pen, plus an app system. It's going to help your CGM talk to your insulin pen, talk to a wonderful app on your phone that's going to tell you about things like insulin on board, the temperature of your insulin, and a lot more. You'll hear more about it in the show. But if you're on MDI or you're thinking of moving to MDI, I think you want the InPen. companionmedical.com. I'd be lying if I told you I knew a lot about competitive paddleboarding and surfing, but Fiona Wylde does, and I talked to her about it, along with her type 1 diabetes diagnosis and how she manages her type 1 while she's doing this sort of, not sort of, but this really intensive activity. Always in the water, too, so kind of seems like it doesn't match up, but Fiona really makes it work. Please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise, and to always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin.
My name is Fiona Wylde. I am 22 years old. I live in a really cool place called Hood River, Oregon, and I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 18 on my high school graduation day.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a very exciting morning and a very terrifying afternoon. But sometimes those things just kind of come together like that, I guess.
Well, I don't know about that.
That's the way I try to look at it anyway.
On my graduation day, I was just like, oh, I see my dad's not going to come. That's sad. Well, they were divorced, and I didn't think he was going to come, but then I kind of thought he was going to, and then I didn't, and then I gave up on it. But the good news for me is that I did not have an incurable disease when that was over, like happened to you. So sure. I want to hear about this for a second. So you're only 22, and you're diagnosed about 4 years ago? Like, actually,
yeah,
probably
4.5.
Yeah, I was going to say a little more, right? So prior to your high school graduation day, was there any indication that something was amiss with your health?
Yeah, for about the 6 weeks leading up to that, I did online high school the last 3 years because I was already competing and traveling and needed to find a way where I could get my education while still traveling to all these different strange places all over the world. So I found an online program that worked for me. So my version of a high school graduation day isn't necessarily like everybody else's, because pretty much for me, it was like, okay, completed all the coursework that, was entitled in getting a high school diploma. And then it was like, I'm done kind of thing. And, my parents were awesome. They wanted to make a little deal out of it because I'd worked hard to get there. So I just remember running downstairs to my mom. I was like, guess what? I finished. I don't have any more work I can do. I guess this means that I'm done. And she was like, wow, super excited, really happy for me. I've been feeling off the last few weeks. I had got my first contract and signed my first contract the previous fall. So when I was 17, I got my first contract from Starboard Stand-Up Paddleboarding, which they're pretty much the largest company that creates wind and water sports equipment in the world. So for me, it was huge. And then, my mom was really pushing me to go to college, but I wanted to try and do this and just see where I could take it and whatnot. And kind of when I signed a contract, it was only a year-long contract, but at the same time, it was going to allow me to financially support myself through a year of competition. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. So, I had obviously had to finish my senior year, and then I was going to have a year to dedicate it to the sport. So I had a couple races. I had a race in April, and I was like out in front doing amazing. This is like my first big race, kind of, to show myself that, deserving of the sponsorship and wanting to push it. And I was in second, like all of the race. It was a 13-mile race. And on mile 12, I went from second to sixth. I just hit a wall. Something happened. And I was like, what? I was so frustrated because I had it. I had the podium, doing super good, and I couldn't figure it out. And so I was like, all right, well, that really sucks, but okay, I need to train. I need to, figure out more things. And so I came back. Actually, no, I didn't come back home. I did 2 more races. I did a race the following weekend and the following weekend after that. And each weekend I was just feeling worse and worse. And I was like, what is going on with this? Like, okay, instead of training, like in between the races, I'm going to rest now and see if that makes it better. And, that went on for about 6 weeks.
Fiona,
and then it was my high school graduation day.
Oh my God, Fiona, you have said, I have so many questions. There's not enough time to talk to you now. Okay, so I need everybody, you slow down, take a big deep breath, okay, and
Okay.
let me pick through what just happened.
Okay,
because,
sorry.
No, because none of what you said was my expectation, right?
Okay.
So okay, when did you start? Okay, I don't even know how to ask this question. So you are a competitive paddleboarder? Is that what you would call yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
I compete professionally in stand-up paddling. I used to compete professionally in windsurfing as well, but now I pretty much focus on stand-up paddling. But I don't just compete in one aspect. I compete in stand-up paddle surfing and stand-up paddle racing. So there's 2 different world tours for that, and I compete on both sides.
Okay. And
so I'm kind of one of the only few that competes on both sides.
You're like an actor who's in a Marvel and a DC movie. I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah. So, and I've done a little bit of my homework to try to figure this out, right? So what is happening here? There's a phone that's not supposed to ring. It's ringing. Here's how I want to begin. Most people listening who think about sports with younger kids are imagining like travel soccer or travel baseball or softball or something like that. But obviously, unlike most of us who can travel to a field, you need a body of water or surf, I would imagine. So
yeah, exactly.
How old were you when you started doing this, and how did it begin?
So it all started with windsurfing for me. My parents were windsurfers, and I grew up windsurfing with them. In Hood River, we have amazing conditions here where we can go windsurfing. And surprisingly, I don't actually live on the ocean. I live about 3 hours inland.
Okay.
The cool thing is that I live on the Columbia River, which is about a mile wide in some places. And, it's the headlands are the headwaters are up in Canada, and then they flow down, through Idaho and then through the Oregon-Washington border where the river enters the Pacific Ocean.
Is this river where you do most of your practice?
Yeah, so this river is where I do pretty much everything, from windsurfing to stand-up paddling. The only thing you can't do here is you can't surf. Okay. So for that, I have to get a bit creative and just drive or fly or, go some other places for some training.
Okay, everybody. I feel very overwhelmed by all the new things I'm learning, so I need to slow down. No, you don't need to be sorry. This is me. I'm not prepared.
But to answer your question, so I started with windsurfing, and I started competing in windsurfing when I was like 11. I did the local races here in town, and then when I was about 13, I got some experience in the waves, and I was like, whoa, this is so cool. I did a trip with my dad, and I was just like, this is absolutely amazing. Like, I want to, learn how to windsurf wave sail more. And so at the time, there was kind of this revamp of the windsurfing tour. It was called the American Windsurfing Tour, and it went all up and down, or all North America, and then eventually ended up going into South America as well. And so then I pretty much started doing that from when I was like 13 until when I was about 19. And that experience of, learning a new sport in a competitive environment got me into I don't know, it just got me into all sorts of situations that I've had experience from that have taken me, to where I am today. Like I got to go to different countries. I got to travel with friends. When I think I did my first trip without my parents when I was 14.
What necessitates you going on a competitive trip without your parents? Is it just they're working, and actually, before I ask you that, so
Yeah.
would you kind of relate what you're saying to me to somebody out there who's listening who's like, oh, my kid played like Little League baseball and then they got really good at it, so they started traveling to play it. And then they, somebody was interested, so they ended up going to college and playing it. Is that so there's no college for windsurfing, I assume or maybe
No.
there is. Well, and why not, by the way? But okay.
There are some college, for windsurfing, not for stand-up paddling.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So yes, in a way it would be similar to that. You kind of start at the beginning, you have a couple of results, you kind of want to push yourself a little bit further and see kind of what that next challenge is, Yeah. And then I quickly got into the part where like, okay, I'm competing for, the title of the tour. And so that is what made me travel more, because then it's like each event you get certain points. And honestly, like my parents have been awesome. They're never like, it's not about the result, it's about having fun and learning things. And kind of with that mindset and that they've taught me since I was so little, it's been easy for me to just go and be like, okay, like even if you completely bomb something, you're still going to be able to learn something from it. And actually, you're probably going to learn more than just from winning it. Yeah. So, the first few years, like I didn't really win. I won some events, but not consistently or this and that, whatever. But the cool thing about the whole windsurf tour is, well, it's wind related, and there would be many mornings because places typically the wind picks up in the afternoon where we would have waves, but we wouldn't have wind. And a few of the people there had stand-up paddleboards, and that's the side that I got introduced to stand-up paddle surfing, was through the windsurf tour.
Yeah, you made your own wind with the paddle.
Yeah, exactly. Right. When there wasn't the wind for windsurfing, I still wanted to go in the waves because I live, 3 hours from any kind of surf. So it was like, okay, this is my chance to take advantage of it.
Gotcha. All right. Okay. That all makes sense. I'm doing well. I really feel like I'm starting to catch up now. It's funny. I don't know if you heard me. I talked to Kate Hall a few weeks ago, and she's, trying to, to jump in the Olympics. And it's funny because like she started talking about like some of the steps she had to take. And I was like, oh, this is where this sport sort of ends up differing from other sports. And when you say there's a tour for like windsurfing, for instance, it's not you and 6 other windsurfing kids who are all like always at the same thing. There's a lot of people at these events, right? How big are the events?
Yeah. Well, that's also a good point too. There weren't really that many other kids. I was kind of one of the only kids within the windsurfing side. There may be like, 4 of us kids or something like that. And then there's, over 200 people in an event. So that was also cool. It made me grow up kind of quick. Being the only one there, like my best friends were 10, 12 years older than me.
Right.
And the same thing with stand-up paddling. Most of the women that I am competing against in the races, at the elite races, I think the girl who is closest in age is 6 years older than me, on the international stage. So I'm definitely one of the youngest racers at the moment. Which, is changing, which is good because we're having some more girls coming up. But within the stand-up paddle events, it's pretty awesome because the stand-up paddle events, we can get like 500 people to a race on a weekend. The elite field might only have like, 50, but with the open competitors, then you have, mass quantity, which is spectacular.
What are you competing for? Like when I say that, I mean, like I realized, like when I use my son as an example, right? Like, so when he was really young, he just was playing, like you said, baseball to get better, right? And then you play in high school and you're trying to get better. But at that point now you're trying to prove to somebody that they should take you on a collegiate team. Like you're trying to prove yourself. Like, and then while you're playing in college, you're hoping that you continue to grow and maybe somebody will draft you. Like that's the pathway. When you're competing, are you competing for a trophy? Are you competing to turn to those people and be like, hey, haha, I won? Or like what's the next step? Is it personal fulfillment or is there something beyond that you're shooting for?
For me, it's definitely, pushing myself. in a comfort zone, but then also outside a comfort zone, and to see kind of how far my skills and fitness will be able to take me, as well as controlling my diabetes along the way. But the reality is there's 3 tours that I end up competing in the year: the APP World Tour for surfing, the APP World Tour for racing, and the European Championship Tour.
Okay.
The start of my year basically starts in Europe this spring. I ended up racing in 6 different races in Europe. And that is pretty much the best of the European stand-up paddle racers in the world, plus many international riders. So there's people like myself from the United States that come over, from Brazil, from Canada, from Australia. Pretty much everybody. The sport focuses on the racing in Europe during the spring. And so that was about 6 weeks of racing and touring, and I ended up winning that this year. So it was pretty exciting. Yeah. So yeah, to win the Euro Tour, you have to have 5 really good results in order to go towards your final tally. And I won 5 races.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it was quite an exciting thing, something I didn't really think that I could win, but I was able to do that. And then on the other side with the surfing, the APP World Tour, you're competing for a world title.
Gotcha.
So within surfing and racing, they're 2 separate competitions, but I won the racing world title in 2016, and I have not won a surfing world title. I've been second a few years, but I haven't won it yet.
So basically, it's sort of broken up into 2 areas. Like, it's your competition and just trying to be good and test yourself, and then the other side of it is, I'm assuming, if you're having good results, you'll start getting sponsored by companies. Those companies will pay you to use their boards or something like that. And then that's how you can kind of finance your ability to continue.
Exactly.
I see.
Going back to kind of what I was saying at the beginning, the year before I graduated, as I graduated in 2015, so fall of 2014, I got sponsored by Starboard, which is that big company. So they pretty much were like, okay, you're young, you're getting really good results. We want to support you to paddle our boards, to go all over the world, to continue to get good results and promote a good image for our brand.
Right. Because when Fiona comes cruising across the finish line on a starboard, there are a lot of people there, and you stand up and hold the board, and they're like, hey, starboard, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And,
okay. They get on the podium, they get all the accolades, everything like that. It helps them, and it helps me as well.
You're the paddling equivalent of like a YouTuber or a guy who plays video games and makes a living at it, where we all like go, did you hear about the guy who makes $1 million a year to play a video game? And
okay, don't quite make $1 million a year.
No. I didn't mean to say that.
I get a lot of questions like, "Oh, that's cool. I didn't even know you could compete in those things."
Well, it's a very uniquely American economy story. It really is. It's you're 14 years old. Now, when it was first happening, when you were younger, was it just sort of like you would imagine, like, hey, my dad played soccer in high school, so I play soccer? Was it just my parents windsurf, and so we windsurfed together, and then there was a place for me to do it competitively, so I went and did it?
Yes, that was for the windsurfing side, but not for the stand-up paddling side, because stand-up paddling is a relatively new sport. It's been around no more than...
Since the wind stopped blowing.
It's been around like 15 years or so, and I got into it with one of the local shops here in town. They wanted to create a kids team, and so I was one of 4 original kids, and that was 9 years ago, and that was how I got introduced to stand-up paddle racing. And that program is still going on. My dad then learned how to stand-up paddle after I was doing it because I was having so much fun, and he wanted to do it with me. And the cool thing is about that kids program is it's still going on. And this last summer, I got to coach the whole program. So that was pretty cool.
A returning star to coach the team.
It was fun.
Absolutely. It's crazy in my mind. I imagine like a bunch of windsurfers standing around on a day when the wind doesn't blow, and one of them going, well, do we go home or what do we do? And somebody's like, if we had a paddle. And then they were just like, oh my God, a paddle. This is genius. Like, try to. Yeah, so now I have to tell you that I hope you understand that most people listening, when you're describing either surfing on a much bigger, because it's a bigger board, right? When you,
it is,
right, or you're paddle boarding, like if you told me right now, Scott, go out into the river, the one feeding from Canada, and stand up on a paddleboard and stay standing on it for, let's say, 10 seconds, and I'll buy you a house. I would not have a house when the day was over, right? Like, I would just be like, I can't accomplish that.
I would be nice. I mean, maybe if I had to buy you a house, I'd put you on like the most narrow board I could find.
Right. Because you're trying to keep the house.
Like, okay, let's go out, for an ice cream or whatever. Be like, excellent. I'll put you on the biggest board. You start. It's just like anything. When you're learning to ride a bike, you have a different kind of bike than a professional cyclist.
You're telling me if I had the right tools, I could stand up on a paddleboard?
Absolutely. That's the cool thing about it. Anybody can do it. You can, all you have to do is you just get a bigger board. So I race on a board that's 14 feet long, 21 and a half inches wide, and you most likely wouldn't be able to stand on that. But if you were to go paddling for your first time, I would give you a board that, is maybe 12 and a half feet long and 30 inches wide.
I thought you were going to say 12 and a half feet wide, because that's how, like, Scott, we're going to throw a picnic table out and you'll be honest with me. I'm 48 years old. How far would I paddle before I had a stroke or an aneurysm? A couple feet, a couple minutes? How far do you think I'd make it?
Surprise yourself. You can go as far as you want to go. That's the cool thing, is that, it doesn't really matter. You don't, okay, if you were to, jump off a start line and try and go sprinting, you'd probably be out of breath kind of soon. But you can jump on a board. You can go with your friends, your family. If you have a dog, you can put your dog on the board, go cruising around. Like, there's all sorts of different things you can do. It's like a bicycle. You have your people who go out and ride 100 miles, in the weekend, and that's what they do for fun. And then you have some people who have cruiser bikes or even e-bikes that, put a picnic basket on the front and go, cruising around. Paddling is the same in that sense. Like, you can, have top of the line race equipment, go, for speed, for distance, for whatever, or you can just grab more of a cruisy board and go have fun, go exploring, maybe, paddle into a different place that you've never seen before, or, it's cool to paddle out and look back at what you're looking at every day and just get a different perspective.
No. See, you're saying this is where people like you who are super athletic don't understand that other people don't have brains like yours. You're saying I would paddle out to get a different perspective, which does sound neat, except I would paddle out and then have a panic attack that there's no way I could make it back again. And then I would start imagining what giant Canadian fish are in the river that will eat my body when I sink to the bottom. Like, that's how it would occur to me.
That didn't cross my mind.
Wouldn't it be great if Fiona's entire career was killed today, as she can't get over the anxiety of thinking about whether or not a salmon could eat her, and she's like, I never thought of it before. I can't go back in the water.
No, I'm okay with it.
You'll be all right. Yeah,
I'll be all right with that.
So first of all, it's amazing, and you said something a while ago already that I jotted down, and I don't make a lot of notes when I do this, but did you say that there was a paddleboard race that was 13 miles?
Yeah.
Okay. So when they say go, first of all, I have questions. Does everyone finish who starts?
Pretty much in the elite field, yeah.
Okay.
In the open field, there might be a couple that pull out, but it'd be more like a marathon in that sense.
Gotcha.
It takes a while. Some people, don't. Maybe some people just get tired or fatigued, and then you have to pull out. But for the most part, and especially within the elite field, pretty much everybody finishes.
How long does it take to go? Like the person who wins, how long does it take them to go 13 miles?
With that particular race, see, that's the other thing with water. It all depends on the conditions. If you have 13 miles with wind at your back and you're going what we call downwind, which you can kind of surf little bumps that the wind is generating the whole time, you're going to go a lot faster than if you have a headwind or completely flat water. So it depends. But in that specific race, that was in North Carolina around Wrightsville Beach. and that was about a 2.5 hour race.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you that I'm not 100% certain I could stand on the board for 2.5 hours. Like, take all the rest
That
of
race
it out.
requires a lot of training.
I'm not kidding. Like,
Yeah.
aren't your legs like super tired?
Your legs are exhausted. Yeah, most people think that all paddling comes from, your arms and your shoulders and all that, but there's so much balancing involved, and your legs are your bigger muscles, so you might as well use them more. So by the end of it, my legs are shot.
Yeah, and you're not strapped into the board, right? Like, you're free balanced on the board. So when you drive with that paddle into the water, you really are anchored by just the grip of your feet on that board.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, see, I'm starting to really think about this now, and as bad of an idea as I thought of this at the beginning, I'm thinking it's even worse idea now that I'm really thinking it through. But
oh, come on.
No, because at least if you were anchored to it, you know what I mean? Like you didn't have like a fulcrum point that was like fixed, and now you're basically like digging in like while you're doing that. So do you lean forward while you're paddling, or do you stand straight up? How does your body?
You definitely lean forward. You lean forward and you have a lot of bend in your knees, so you can have that drive. And kind of what you're thinking about would be more similar to like paddling a canoe or rowing in the sense, because then you would have a fulcrum, coming from your hips because you're seated, but because we're standing up, you really do have to use your legs. And it actually is beneficial to be able to move your feet around the board.
Okay. So you can kind of reposition so you can stability, and I'm imagining drive from different angles for steering purposes and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
See?
Yeah.
Look at me.
You got it.
Intellectually, I understand.
Your board is getting narrower. Now we can give you like a 28-inch wide board.
You're out of your mind. I saw Jaws when I was 5. I'm not getting in any water on a board. Okay. So, and I know there's no shark in that river, and I don't care.
There are not. It's freshwater.
It doesn't. Listen, if someone would have taken you to Jaws in the 70s when you were 5 years old, by the way, my parents, a huge mistake. You would have the same concern I have right now. You'd be like, no, but that mechanical shark will eat me. So, okay. I'm seriously, there's people my age right now who got drug into that movie who are like, yeah, damn right, man. There's no reason to go into the water. Okay, so 13 miles over 2.5 hours. And do you know for that specific race, the person who finished dead last, how long it took them? Do you have any idea?
Probably took them about 3.5, 4 hours.
Another hour and a half from, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And if you want to quit, someone comes gets you, just raise your hand and start crying. What happens? What do you do?
There are support boats that are, all up and down the course, and jet skis and all that. So that's good. That's important. Safety is huge, being out in the water.
Right.
Yeah, so there's all sorts of different watercraft that are kind of patrolling the area. So, the best thing to do in any situation on the water, if you're in trouble, is to sit down on your board and stay with your equipment, so you have something to float on, and then you can wave your hands over your head.
I have a good friend who lives on the water in North Carolina, and I think she paddleboards pretty much constantly. And I know if she heard this, she'd be like, you could do it. And I'm like, no, I don't think I can. But, okay, so now,
our races are that long. We compete in all sorts of different types of things. There's different races like surf races where you go in and out of the surf. There are distance races, which are pretty much anywhere from like 9 to 13 miles. Mm-hmm. There are flat water, bumpy, ocean, pretty much everything. There's some races that are more like 4K races, and then there's even races that are like 200 meters. Wow. So right now I'm training actually for a 200-meter race, a 4K race, and an 18K race.
What's training look like? How do you train? So
for me, I'm actually really lucky right now to have 3 weeks at home. This doesn't happen very often. Mm-hmm. So I've basically broken down the 3 weeks I have into different training days for a specific goal. So if there's something, I'm going to China for the ICF World Championships at the end of this month. Mm-hmm. And so the first day I will be competing in 200-meter sprints. The second day I'll be competing in a 4K technical race. And the third day I'll be competing in an 18-kilometer distance race.
Oh my God.
So when I take a look at that, I look at, okay, what are my strong suits and what are my weak suits? And the weaknesses are what I focus on in the training leading up to it. Okay. So I've broken down each week into basically 6 out of the 7 days. I'm on the water doing different drills and intervals and workouts that are building up on certain weaknesses. And then I have Monday, which is today, mm-hmm. which is my complete off day. So today I won't be on the water. I won't go run or anything like that. And it's been fun. It's been fun too, because it's hard. It's hard to focus on something that you're not really that great at, or, even if I'm decent at it, it's definitely, I'm not as strong as my strong suit. Right. And I'm learning a lot. That's the thing that's crazy. It's like, okay, even if I'm, leading the tour at the moment or in the top 3 or whatever, like, some people would be like, oh, well, you got it. And it's like, no, you can constantly be learning new things.
That's fascinating. Is there any dry land training? Like, is there anything you do in a gym that's specific for this, or is it really need to be on the water?
You have to be on the water. That's pretty much where it comes from. Because, like, you can do all sorts of different fitness to get your base up, but it's also so much technique involved that you really have to spend the time on the water to focus on that. But I'm going to spend last week 2 days, and then this week 2 days, and the following week 2 days as well in the gym. And that's going over a lot of like plyometric stuff, agility, balance, trying to get fast twitch muscles going faster. And I normally could walk out of those days super sore. But beyond that, I love running. So any chance I get to go for a run, I go for a run or bike ride, or it's just such a beautiful place that I live that if I can be outdoors, I want to be outdoors.
I hear. Listen, I'm not judging you. I know that, oh, she just got disconnected. Do you think she just ran outside?
Whoa.
You were like,
I would so sorry about that.
No, you were like, if I can be outdoors, I'd love to be outdoors. Then it hung up, and I thought, she just probably went outside.
My computer just turned black. So sorry about that.
No. It's it's absolutely fine. Don't think anything of it. Okay, so I think I understand. I mean, listen, I understand academically all that what you've explained to me, and even though I'm still in my mind thinking, am I going to ask her about like doing this in the ocean? Like, do you just paddle out and then ride in like you're surfing, but you have a paddle with you?
Yeah. Pretty much.
Okay, so what's the difference between surfing and paddleboarding in the ocean?
When I go and I compete in surfing, the big difference is when you're traditional surfing, you are, laying down on your stomach, you don't have a paddle in your hands, and you're prone paddling, so you're on your belly before you pop up. Okay. My board looks a lot like a surfboard, and most people would say that is not a stand-up paddleboard because it's really small. So my stand-up paddle surfboard is very small because it just has to be thick enough, just has to have enough volume so I can stand on it without falling over. Okay. So then I'm paddling in already standing up when I catch waves. Mm-hmm. But like, for example, most people, would shortboard on like a 5'8" or a 5'10" or something like that. My stand-up paddleboard is a 7'0", and when I stand on it, it pretty much sinks underwater. Oh, no kidding.
I would like you to do something for me if you ever can teach yourself to do it. While you're surfing, I'd like you to reach up with one hand and spin the paddle with one hand over your head like a baton. And
you would be surprised.
I swear, if you can do that, I understand why you have sponsors. Because can you get to that, do you think? Or do you think it's not really worth
I think I might have done that a few times.
No kidding. See? Yeah. That's excellent. And that I would just be like, that girl wins. And they'd be like, no, she's actually in 4th place. I'd be like, no, it doesn't matter. Look what she's doing with the paddle. No, that's got to be there's style points. That's hilarious. Right? There are no style points in this? Okay.
Well, I mean, I think it's more about the surfing at that point.
I hear you.
But we actually have some inside jokes with some of the competitors where it's a lot of people think that, just pushing the paddle around is what gets you points, where in reality you have to surf. So it's kind of funny that you mentioned that.
You've been involved in water sports so long that you went to high school online and you came out. And now what's your lifespan like in this? And it sounds like with the people you're competing with, you could do this for a really long time. Is that how you think about it?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I did online high school, and then I got sponsored, and my mom was like, no, you have to go to college, and then I got a sponsorship that came with a contract, and she was like, okay, 1 year, let's see where it goes. So that was the year that I got diagnosed with diabetes, and then I was like, oh, great, here's my first year being a professional athlete, something I really wanted to do and be since I was, super small, and
this happens.
That was from diabetes, yeah.
I understand it from a parenting perspective, right? Like the idea of like, hey, I really need you to go to college because I want you to get a job, and I'm not gonna be alive forever, and I need to know you're gonna be able to take care of yourself when I'm old and gone. Like I think about that with my kids too.
Absolutely.
Now though, you have a little success. I imagine you must have walked into the house with the first contract, held it up over your head, and said, "Oh, who has to go to college? Not me, because I'm making money."
Well,
like, did you run around like, was it like a rap video?
It wasn't so much no, it wasn't so much like that. It was more of like, look, I got this chance to do it. I will go to college, but for right now, let me just try and focus on this.
I can't argue with it. I can't argue with it all. I don't. Listen, very few people get drafted to play professional baseball, and I don't imagine my son will be one of them. But if it happened,
would be amazing.
If it happened, I would not know how to stop him. Like I would not. I wouldn't know. You know.
It would be something slightly similar to that. So then I was like, okay, great. Now I have type 1 diabetes and a professional contract. But I kind of wanted to keep racing, and type 1 just came at the wrong time. I don't think there ever is a right time for it.
No.
But it was like, okay, I'm just going to keep doing this. I'm going to figure out some systems on how to, get sugar with me out in the water and, learn all the feelings. It took a little bit. But that year, I basically finished the season. And the next year, I won the racing world title.
That's amazing.
So then it was kind of like, okay, this is going well.
I can do this, right? So let me pick through that a little bit. So when you're first diagnosed, I'm assuming you leave the hospital with like pens or syringes and insulin and a meter, right? That's about it.
Surprisingly, because I didn't really think that anything was, that wrong. I knew I wasn't feeling great, but basically I just went into my family care doctor, and I had explained that I had dry mouth, I've been losing some weight, I had an infection and this and that, whatever. And he looked at me and he's like, has anybody ever tested your blood sugar? I was like, no. what is that?
Yeah.
And I was like, thinking, okay, all sorts of tests, what's involved. And he just pulled out a meter and he said, let me prick your finger. I was like,
no, thank you. See.
Okay. And then he pricked my finger, and the number that popped up on the screen was 586. And I was all happy because I just graduated high school that morning. So I'm like, great, what's that out of? Like 1,000?
Yeah.
And he goes, no. I'm really sorry, but you pretty much have type 1 diabetes. And I was like, tears, and I didn't know what that meant. And, I had no idea what diabetes, let alone type 1 was. But I live in a small town, and he pretty much said, go home, because I just went to the doctor's office on my own. He was like, go home, talk with your parents, and he gave me his personal cell phone number and was like, have them give me a call, and I can talk and, help you guys out if you need anything. So then that night, I didn't get any insulin, didn't do anything. I actually never went to the hospital because I was 18, so I wasn't an adolescent, I guess, anymore. It's kind of strange. But so then I went, and the next day got connected with a diabetes educator, and she went through absolutely everything, explained how insulin works, what diabetes is, and she was spectacular. And she's the one, who showed me how to prick my finger and how to, calculate carbs and give myself insulin for that. And that's when it all started. But the problem was that I was supposed to go to Europe to race for the first time 5 days later. And I was like, oh my goodness, when I first got diagnosed, I was bummed because I was like, okay, obviously I'm not going to go. This is not my priority right now. My priority is my health. But then after getting insulin started and immediately coming out of the 500s, which is good, to range, we went and spoke with my doctor, and I was sitting there with my parents, and I was like, okay, so here's the thing. I was supposed to go to England to race. My dad was already planning on coming with me, but if it's going to be any problem for my health, please tell me, and I absolutely will not go. That's right. I don't want to put myself in any harm. And he looked at me and he goes, that is not a decision for me to make. It's not going to hurt you. So I think you can make that decision as a family. And I was like, okay, Dad, we're going to England. Wow. And then we got on a plane 2 days later.
And what did you have with you? Just needles and like a meter and some insulin?
So I had, when I went on that first trip, I had Lantus, I had Humalog Quick Pens, and I had a box full of needles, a box full of test strips. I had a Sharps container. I had an extra meter, and I had a lot of gummy bears all sorts of, I found these goo chomps that I could bring with me on the water. And my mom sent us on the plane with like the biggest cooler full of food and snacks and everything. It was amazing. I'm surprised they even let it on as carry-on. It was so big, but she was like, "You're not going anywhere without food."
Probably thought you were like trying to start a grocery store in Europe.
Yeah, probably.
Well, that's so now looking back, was that incredibly brave or incredibly stupid? Like, when you look at it now, do you think, knowing what you know now, would you have still gone?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Like, for me, it was exactly the thing that I needed to do and needed to hear from my doctor. He knew me. He's been my family doctor for ages. And, he's seen what I've done competitively and could also see how, a diagnosis of type 1 can, change your life in many ways. And so for him to say, you got to do what you want to do and you will figure this out as you go, doesn't have to hold you back, they were the best words that I could, ever ask to hear without even knowing that's what I needed to hear. Because that just kind of gave me a little bit of confidence to go and do what I actually wanted to do, which was go to Europe and go race and do what I love and be on the water.
Joking around aside, I think that's amazing. I'm a big proponent on the podcast of giving people what they need as far as tools up front so they can make good decisions. I don't like the idea of slow walking people into the information, let them learn it slowly, because inevitably, something happens, then you need some information, you don't have it, then the fear starts building up. And then before you know it, you're kind of overwhelmed by the fear. And then even when you get good information, it's hard to take it. So I think that's really amazing. I
mean, for me, my life didn't really stop when I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. My life was up and running, and it was just going to be something that I, have to figure out and continue. I'm sure today there's going to be something that I'm going to learn from it.
Well, Fiona, I'm going to say something I told Kate Hall, and I think it applies to you as well. And I don't know that all the time that people who have that competitive athletic nature like you do understand that it doesn't exist in everybody else. But, I always use Chris Freeman as my example. Like, Chris sees like snow and these two tiny skis and thinks to himself, "Oh, I will ski a long distance with only these two poles to propel me." And you look at water and a small board and think, "You know what I should do? Go on a 13-mile race on that water standing on this board." There's what I'm saying is, and it's probably not like life-threatening, but you have a mental illness and you don't realize it. But seriously,
I won't deny it.
Seriously, it's a way of thinking that lends itself to the challenge of diabetes. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, right? You look at the diabetes, and you're like, well, I've got these needles and this insulin. How do I get to the other side? And that's really cool. It's amazing, and it's why you're a great role model for it too. So tell me nowadays you're a Dexcom user. You're using the G6. Mm-hmm. And when did that start? Awesome. When did you get your CGM?
I got my CGM about 8 months after I was diagnosed. And it was the Dexcom 4 at the beginning. And when that thing came out, I was like, oh my gosh, this thing is the coolest thing ever. Like, are you kidding me? I don't have to prick my fingers and I actually know what my blood sugar is. And pretty much I have not worn a Dexcom since then. About 4 years.
Yeah,
I've been wearing Dexcom. And
my daughter's a daily wearer too. Like she doesn't take breaks from her stuff like that.
No, for me, it's just a safety thing. Just being able to constantly monitor and know where my blood sugar is helps me in everything. I mean, it sucks, if you go super high or if you're going really low, it affects everything else you're trying to do during the day. So yeah, just to be able to have a monitor on it and catch crashes or catch highs, before they get to the point where you get tired or you get exhausted or you have to take time, out of your day to manage your diabetes rather than focusing on what you're doing. If, things like that can be monitored better and alleviated, then I don't see any reason why I wouldn't wear one.
Yeah, I agree. I want to use up the rest of our, not use up, but I want to use the rest of our time to talk about your management, because you were in such a significantly different situation than most people as far as like the intensity and the load and the work on your body, right? And so everyone listening, is, well, the people listening to this podcast probably don't think of it the same way, but a lot of people with diabetes would think, I can't paddleboard because I'll exert myself and then my blood sugar is going to drop and I'm going to, it's going to be up and down. I can't possibly do it. So my expectation is, and I don't know this before I ask you, that you don't have a lot of variability in your blood sugar. I'm assuming you're not going from 40 to 600 and jumping around like that.
No, not 40 to 600,
right.
But, I could have a 80 to 200. Occasionally a 250 or something like that.
Sure.
I think before we go into specifics of what I do on the water, for me, exercise helps in every way. Even if I am high and, I've just been giving myself insulin and haven't been able to go down or whatever, even if I just go for a walk around the block or like 10-minute, Cruisey jog or something like that, I will be able to drop my insulin, and it just makes my blood sugar, and it just makes me feel better. But for being on the water, I've been using, the InPen from Companion Medical for the last year, just about. And that has helped me a ton, because you can actually see how much insulin is still in your system, and you can remember how much was in your last dose and when your last dose was. Because sometimes, if you're, running around and, okay, it's time for dinner, and you give yourself insulin and you keep, you're cooking the rest of it. And I'm like, oh my God, did I give myself insulin? So InPen has really helped me, because I, can see how much insulin is in my system. And that also helps me plan for going out on the water. So if I have extra insulin in my system before I hit the water, maybe I should eat a little bit of something before I go out and paddle.
Yeah.
But
go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I apologize. Go ahead.
No worries. So when I'm on the water, this is for racing or, even just for going running or, anything like that. I pretty much always wear a hydration pack, which has water in it because, it's just good to stay hydrated out there. And it has a couple pockets as well. So my InPen can go in the back. I take it with me just, in case for whatever. I have one pocket that has my phone and the other pocket that has some type of sugar. Like I use a lot of time like Cliff Bar Goo Chomps. Because they're individual squares, and I know how many carbs are in each square and how much each square will raise the amount of, will raise my blood sugar.
Okay.
That being said, when I'm paddling, my blood sugar typically does drop. So I try and aim to get my blood sugar up, around 180, 165, somewhere in there, before I get out in the water. And then I'm monitoring it pretty much during the whole paddle. I have an Apple Watch, so I can see my blood sugar there, and just keeping an eye on where things are. I have sugar if I need it, but at the same time, I'm focusing on the paddle. I put some electrolytes in my hydration pack so I can stay more hydrated and keep everything kind of flowing a little better.
It's amazing.
But it's pretty much those three things: having water, having my Goo Chomp there, and having my phone connecting my Dexcom. So while I'm on the water, I can actually see what I'm doing. And if I need to eat, I figured out a system where I just open the little pocket before I even start a race. And if I have to eat during a race, it's just like a 1-second motion of grabbing a Goo Chomp and eating it and then continuing to paddle.
I'm dying to know, have you ever had to pull out your InPen and give yourself insulin while you're on the board?
I have not had to do that during a race, but a lot of times after a race, I find that even if I was going down during, after the race, I'll end up spiking, whether it's excitement because I've won or just because I was going through a lot of the carbs that were in my system and now I've stopped and I'm stationary and all those carbs are now sitting there and I start going back up. So I keep it with me because sometimes you finish a race and your bag or whatever is a little ways away. And so then I have given myself insulin on my board at the finish line to, prepare for that spike that I know is going to be coming after a race.
I think you would really enjoy a couple of episodes that I've done with a CD named Jenny who comes on the show a lot, and we did a lot about exercise and that kind of stuff.
Cool.
And taught you. I think I'll give it to you personally afterwards, and I think
that would be great. Thank you.
Like, please. Okay, that's crazy. First of all, what you just said, all of it is just absolutely cool. But so the InPen keeps track of when you've used your insulin, which is helpful. It also keeps track of insulin on board, right? So like it's telling you. So I'm assuming you're just a person who didn't want an insulin pump. Is that right? You just weren't looking for an insulin pump.
I like the fact that with the InPen, I can always have insulin with me, and I'd have to travel with extra cartridges. So for the ease of that, I'm not a big fan of having multiple devices on me, just because I typically have wetsuits or, like hydration packs that are kind of scooching around my midsection and then up on my back and all that. For me, this is the system that I've come up with that works for me. It doesn't mean that I, don't try an Omnipod every now and again to try and, let's see if this helps me steady out, just to try the different things that are out there. But for right now, this is the system that I like, that's working with me, that I've figured out how to manage with my training and sports and all that. And for that, it works.
It's excellent. No, it's amazing. So obviously everyone's their own person. And
absolutely.
And you're saying to yourself, look, this is a fear for me. If I lose my infusion set from a pump, I'm really afraid now all of a sudden there's no slow acting insulin happening, and I don't want that fear. And so what's the next best thing? And I think a lot of people are just like, well, I'll just inject and I'll do this. That's fine. You actually found a piece of equipment that helps you even more. And that's spectacular.
That was the only thing that I was bummed about, is it's like, okay, with the Humalog Quick Pen's, like, great, it's easy, but I don't have any of the data that I would have from a pump. And I mean, diabetes is so much about numbers and changing and trying to adjust to all these different things. And so when I found InPen, that was like, okay, well, this is a pen that I can just inject. It's simple, but it has all the data of a pump. I was like, mind blown.
Yeah.
This is a win-win. Like, where can I get this thing?
So do you actually whip out like your InPen app and look at your data and make decisions about your next race and things like that?
Oh, all the time. Yeah, it sits right next to my Dexcom app on my home screen, and I just kind of flip back and forth between the two. I'm like, okay, this is how much insulin I have on board right now. This is where my blood sugar is. This is the activity I want to go do. Or maybe this is the homework that I have to do. So I'm going to be sitting here for the next, 4 hours, and I'm not going to be doing exercise. How do I plan all those things?
Yeah.
And that is where the InPen has really helped me take all of that into consideration.
Like, so I'm trying to imagine you're getting ready to go on a race, and your blood sugar is lower than you want it to be. You then you check the InPen app. It tells you how much insulin you have on board. Do you ever then just say, "Oh, I'm going to take a little bit of these carbs right now because I think I'm going to fall no matter what"?
Absolutely.
You have those moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if I am, below a certain number, or even if I am dropping, and say I'm at 165, but I'm dropping and kind of quickly, I'd love to start a race at 165.
Right.
But if I'm dropping, then I'm not going to be at 165 for very long. So I will definitely eat a bit. Not, if the race is in an hour, I won't eat that much. If the race is in 5 minutes and I'm pedaling out to the start line and my Dexcom shows an arrow starting to go down, that's when I start, okay, it's time to munch.
Right.
It's time to have some food, because the worst thing is going into a race with arrows going down.
Yeah, and I'm assuming too, you can see, you look on the Dexcom and say, hey, look, I'm going down, but not only do I know I'm going down, but this InPen's telling me I still have 2 units left in me.
Right.
So
yeah.
I have to feed that insulin right now before I get on this board, because I'm going to have
I'm going
to have like the impact from the paddling and the impact from the insulin that's left over. And if you had a regular pen or needles, you would not know how much is left over. You would just think, oh, maybe this is the end of the bolus or whatever, and you wouldn't have that same information. Yeah, I always say to people that the difference between pumping and injecting is just, with injecting, you lose the ability to manipulate your basal insulin. And that's sort of it. But the truth is, if you have an InPen, that's not sort of it. There's a lot more you get with InPen than you wouldn't get with a regular pen. If your insulin gets too warm in the pen, does the pen tell you?
Yeah, it does, which for me is awesome because I've have a lot of races in Asia, and there it's super hot and humid, and that's difficult. It tells you if your pen is too warm or too cold.
So for the people listening, I think we now need to know your dog's name. So
sorry.
No, don't be sorry. Just I want to know what her name is so people can.
Her name is Sharky.
Sharky, because I have to tell you, you have used a word twice while we've been talking that I thought, I wish I was cool enough to say Cruisey, but I'm not. And you've said it twice now, and twice I've thought, that is such an amazing word. And I don't know how to spell it, and I'm fascinated by your use of it. It's so perfect. I'm just like, Cruisey should be someone's nickname.
That would be a good one. Sharky's not so much of a cruiser, but she...
Well, Fiona, can I say something here? And I only want 2% if this works out, but I think you should start your own wet gear line called Cruisey.
Cruisey.
Cruisey by Wylde. I'm telling you right now. Wylde. Or Wild Cruisey, or so. There's something in there. I think it's fascinating. Anyway, and your dog sounds like a wolf, by the way. Is it a giant animal?
She's actually quite medium-sized. Oh, okay. She's a little husky mix. So you weren't too far off with that one. But she's only about 40 pounds.
I thought she was chasing a bear away from your log cabin or something like that, what it felt like to me. But,
I mean, I'm in Oregon. I'm not that far out in the
woods. Right now, people on the East Coast are like, how come he makes fun of places like Maine, but he hasn't made fun of Oregon yet? And the truth is, I don't know, because I've thought of it a couple of times, but I just haven't done it. So there's something about Oregon apparently
now you can make fun of.
No, I like it. Oregon seems like a place I would want to be. So
it's definitely a place I like to be.
So tell me a little bit about using InPen while you're traveling, like airplanes, hotels, that kind of stuff.
The nice thing is, traveling with time zones and all that stuff is really difficult with, diabetes and insulin management because, especially if you are going to be doing, you're giving yourself long-acting insulin in addition to, your short-term insulin for meals, that gets a little bit tricky.
Okay.
Being able to keep track. I mean, my favorite thing about the InPen is probably its most simplest function of just being able to see how much insulin is on board and being able to have a device that helps me calculate. Sorry about the dog.
Don't be sorry. Seriously, don't be sorry. People actually miss my dog on the podcast. I moved to a different part of the house to set up a more permanent place to do the podcast from, and because of that, our dog Basil does not snort and snore in the background anymore. And I get notes sometimes like, I miss Basil, and I was like, yeah, I don't, because all I would do is sit there listening and think, God, the dog's so loud it would make me nervous the whole time. I'd like to understand what the circle of life is there between the pen and the Dexcom and the app. So if you want to take care of him first, Sharky first, and don't feel any pressure to start talking while you're doing something.
We had the doorbell go off, so it's an exciting morning over here.
How can there be visitors? So you don't live in the middle of like.
I don't live in the middle of the wood. I have a bunch of neighbors that live all around me.
People, all right. So you were like the doorbell. I'm like, oh my God, the doorbell. That was probably Sasquatch. She's gonna be dead in a second.
Yeah, if it's okay, if you don't mind giving me 1 minute, I can just put you on mute and come right back.
Go do what you gotta do. I'll be here.
Hello.
Hey, she's back. How are you?
We are back. I'm sorry about the introduction.
Please don't be sorry. You sound terrific. Explain to me how InPen integrates with the Dexcom CGM and the app on your phone.
The two apps are separated. They're next to each other on my phone, but the companion medical app that shows me all of my InPen data, that app has also my Dexcom data on it. So it helps, basically when I give myself insulin, that will come into, show up as a little dot on my screen. And on top of that, it'll also show me my Dexcom data as well. So I can see okay, I just gave myself 3 units at 130, and then as the information goes across the screen, that dot of my Dexcom, okay, where my, current blood sugar was when I gave myself that insulin also moves with it. So then you can have an idea of like, okay, how much insulin you gave yourself at what time. And, okay, did I give myself the right amount of insulin or did I give myself the wrong amount of insulin?
Does the InPen have a dose calculator?
Yes. It does. I use it all the time. Yeah.
So your InPen app has information from your Dexcom on it. So you open up your InPen app, it knows what your blood sugar is because of your Dexcom. Do you then just tell it, this is how many carbs I'm thinking of having, and it suggests an amount of insulin?
Yeah, so I've set prerequisites of, okay, this is my carb ratio and this is what I'm planning on doing. And you pretty much put in, how many carbs that you want to do or want to eat. And then you give yourself, okay, it's suggesting this amount of insulin. And you're like, all right, I think that's about right. Or, you know what, maybe I'm going to have a little bit more food than that. So I'm going to give myself a little bit more. But it's nice because you can think of, okay, what do I want to eat? How many carbs are in it roughly? And then it's nice because I would normally just be like, okay, that for me, that's this amount of units. Whereas using that, it definitely gives me more precise, it just gives me a more precise number of like, no, Fiona, you actually need more insulin than that. You're going to go high. And so that helps me kind of alleviate a lot more of the like big swings of up and down.
That's excellent. That's one of the major things that's missing when you're injecting.
Right. Yeah.
That whole piece of it. Plus now the InPen app knows how much insulin's on board. So in the same situation, except say you've had say you had a snack at 11 o'clock and you gave yourself some insulin. Now it's just an hour and a half later and you're going to have a meal. Mm-hmm. When you put in your, I'm going to eat 40 carbs, it takes into account the insulin that's still left from the snack, and it gives you a different dose if that insulin's still active.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And how valuable do you find that information?
Well, for me, it's huge because, a lot of times it's easy to just look at a meal and be like, okay, I know how many carbs are in here. Mm-hmm. And that's how much insulin I'm going to use. But it's harder when it's like, okay, I already gave myself some insulin for food a little while ago, and I don't necessarily know how much, insulin is left or how much has been absorbed. And so then you end up stacking insulin. And for me, for anybody really, I think stacking insulin is one of the things you want to try and avoid the most.
Yeah. No, you do not want to have more insulin than you need in your body. That's for certain.
No.
Have you had any experiences with the InPen app telling you, hey, your insulin's getting too hot or too cold?
I haven't had it where it's too cold. A lot of the times I'm traveling to warmer places, which is kind of nice. But I definitely have it where it's been like, hey, you have an alert. You definitely need to, cool your insulin down, or pretty much like, hey, your insulin's too hot, replace it.
That's excellent. And that's probably incredibly handy for people who are traveling, or, your sport thing is so like different than most people's, but in a similar vein, people go to the beach all the time with their insulin pen.
Yeah.
And so if you think, maybe I guess it's just so simple that you're like, oh, I'll put it here in this bag and it'll be okay. And then it ends up not being, you would never know that. And this thing just sends an alert to your phone. It's like, hey, the pen's too warm, and you move it somewhere cooler.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And, the great thing about that too is it'll give you reminders of like, hey, you've used your pen for 28 days. It's time to replace it. Even if you still have insulin remaining, stuff like that. I used to write in Sharpies on my pens, like, okay, I need to, go ahead and yeah, I can only use it, until the 21st or whatever. And then I'd have to toss it out. But now it was all, reminded, and I don't have Sharpie marks all over my pens.
How does that work? When you pop in a new cartridge, does it reset on its own, or do you have to tell it, like, I put a new cartridge in?
No, when you put a new cartridge in, it pretty much knows that you put a new cartridge. You have to say that you're putting a new cartridge in, mm-hmm. Just like kind of how you would with a Dexcom, where you're like, okay, I'm, pairing a new Dexcom. You don't have to take a picture of it or anything like that, like right. You would with the G6. But you do have to just, put a new cartridge in, and you have to prime it a couple times, just so you know that, okay, your needle isn't blocked or anything like that. Yeah. And then it starts recording, and you're good to go.
That's amazing. What do you use the information? You said earlier in the interview that you use the information to make decisions about like what to do next and stuff like that from the InPen app. But does the app also lend itself to you talking to your endocrinologist with the information that
Oh
comes out of
my
it?
goodness. Yes, that is the best part, actually, because it prints out massive charts. Like, I can print out like 4-page charts from months and months and months of data of using the InPen. Pretty much as long as you're using the InPen, you can print out a chart that shows your, average time in range, the average insulin that you're giving yourself, the most amount of insulin you're giving yourself, what to expect in terms of like targets and all that stuff. And it has helped my endocrinologist and I a lot trying to figure out, hey, look, you have this pattern here. Let's try and figure out how to solve this pattern. That helps me alleviate some of the highs and the lows.
So you and the doctor find the charts and the graphs that the InPen app gives you like relatable and easy to understand. It's not.
Yeah, super. They're all color coordinated and all that, which is really nice.
Color. I like pretty colors. You know
yeah,
what?
Me too.
Colors are Cruisey. See, it doesn't
colors
work.
are definitely Cruisey.
Is there anything about the InPen that I haven't asked you that you really think, wow, this is what people should know about it?
They also give you your long-acting reminders. So I take Lantus, so it'll give me a reminder of like, hey, you need to take your Lantus, and then you can record that in the in the app as well. So it says, okay, I just gave myself X amount of units of Lantus, like it's all recorded in there. And that's good too, because that kind of goes back to my thing of, oh, oops, yeah, I forgot to, give myself this or give myself that. And it basically, because with pens, it is kind of easy to forget, or it's easy to just like give yourself insulin and then walk away from it. Because you don't have something attached to your body for the constant reminder. So you, in a way, like I definitely feel a bit more free, which is really nice, but it's easier to skip some things too.
Wow.
And that's where the InPen makes sure that you don't skip steps that, maybe are easy to forget. It helps you plan for the steps that you didn't forget, and then it helps you plan for the future as well, which is good.
Hey, everybody can use somebody on their side to go, hey, don't forget to take your insulin right now, or, this is happening. Like diabetes is a lot to remember. And I think that
there's so many moving parts.
Yeah, right. And so if there's an app that's, listen, it's really kind of fascinating when you stop and think about it. Like, you're young, so you think the whole world works like this. But for most of us, an insulin pen that attaches to an app on my cell phone that's talking to my continuous glucose monitor, that's reading the interstitial fluid and telling me what my blood sugar is and how fast it's going, and then tells me, hey, I know you probably think that this lunch is 4 units, but you forgot that you gave yourself insulin an hour and a half ago, so we're just going to do 3.5 instead. That's a lot of cool all in one place.
Yeah. That's really, more than Cruisey.
Yeah, no.
That's just like super cool.
Exactly. Yeah, it's mind blowing. And I'll tell you right now, for people who've had diabetes for 10 years, they're like, wow, that's really great. People who've had it for 20 years are just blown away by this idea. This is an entirely different world for them. And it's very cool that you came on and talked about it. I really appreciate it. Well, Fiona is just another in a long line of people living with type 1 diabetes doing what seems like amazing things to me. I'm sure those of you who have ever surfed or stood up on a paddleboard are like, Scott, it's not that amazing. But first of all, she's competing at a very high level at this. You're just doing it for fun on vacation. And B, I don't want to do that. So it all seems very scary to me when people are like, I got up on a big wave and came flying down to the earth. No, I don't want that. But I love that she likes it, and I love how well she does with her diabetes while she's competing. I hope you enjoyed listening to Fiona, and I hope you enjoyed these last number of episodes, or I think the last 3 months on Fridays, that have been sponsored by Companion Medical. I want to thank them very much for their support of the Juicebox Podcast, and say that I think they'll be back in 2020. You can check Fiona out at FionaWylde.com. She's also got a really great Instagram account, because she's doing like cool stuff on it. So let me see if I can find it for you real quick. It's just Fiona_Wylde. And she's always standing on something that looks like it shouldn't really float, or laying on something that looks like it shouldn't float, or standing and laying, or she's just always balancing on something in the water, which is really cool. You should check her out. And if you're thinking of taking a pump break, or you're using MDI right now, you really need to take a moment to check out the InPen. Not only does it do amazing things and give you a lot of the functionality that a pump can give you, but the cost of it will surprise you. So check out the InPen. Go to companionmedical.com right now. There are links in your show notes and at juiceboxpodcast.com if you can't remember companionmedical.com, but I feel like you can.
The Juicebox Podcast is super cruisy. Thanks for having me on the show today.
The first person to leave a review of the podcast that indicates that the show is super cruisy gets a shout out on the show. Just make the review somewhere, send me a link to it so I can see it. I just want to see it in print somewhere. Make sure you spell cruisy correctly.